I did like the idea that she was able to juggle everything, because that's what I was trying to do too. You know, that was really literally the day after President Kennedy was shot. And we worked all night. We worked at the Lever Brothers building over on the east side of LA, and running through the halls and running through there, and then they finally did that. It was such a sad, difficult day. So this didn't seem too hard at all. And they faked it. We did have a box under us, and the steam was fine. But we were in, Bob Vaughn was a very close friend of the Kennedys, and it was a very, obviously such a terrible, terrible time, but that's what we were doing the day after. And so my feelings were pretty much somewhere else then. Well, of course, with the live TV show, the golden age of television in New York, you rehearsed for about 8 days, and you got to be kind of almost like a family. You got to know each other. You went each day, and they had all the scenes all laid out on tape in a loft, usually downtown, or in a hotel ballroom midtown. They would do that. So you would rehearse the scenes in order, and I remember doing the one with, it was called Guilty is the Stranger. It was Philco Playhouse, directed by Arthur Penn, written by Tad Moselle, and starring Paul Newman and Fay Bainter and myself. It was a 3-character show. And Arthur Penn was just an amazing director, because he was the camera, per se. He would kind of just swoop around and, follow us as the camera, and just kind of pull the emotions. It was a very emotional show, beautifully written. And just working with him, I'd never worked with anybody like that before or since, really. But it was, so it wasn't just the one take. That was the difference when I came out to do film. Film is that one take and it's gone. This one, you're kind of working on it each day, honing it, changing it, maybe new lines, pretty much like theater. It was like theater. Well, I felt that the cameras pretty much had to come. You got to do pretty much what you had been rehearsing all week. The cameras come in that day before the show. You do the dress and the camera rehearsals. So I kind of felt that film was so static. You had to really pay your homage to the camera. You had to find your key light. It was pretty. The camera pretty much came to you in television. They were gigantic, cumbersome things, but they pretty much had to adhere to your, work that you'd been doing for the last week. Whereas in film, it's static. It's right there, and you'd better know what you're doing. You bring everything way down as far as emotions and so forth, compared to the theater or live TV. There were those nerves when it was time, when they did the countdown from, say, 20. They're in the control booth, they go 20 on down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the director's in there issuing directions as he goes along on that countdown, and it's like, oh my gosh. But I was really, as a kid, you don't have any nerves. It would be a lot harder to do that today.
Ever forget a line?
Oh, yeah, I did once. It was unbelievable. I thought the other actor had forgotten her line, and it was me. It was me, and I realized that, and I adjusted. But, oh, yeah, that's a terrible feeling. Terrible, because you really can't do it again. Well, on the Philco and Goodyear Playhouse, which would be at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night, they alternated weekly. I mean, you had some of the best writers, Patty Chayefsky, some of the finest directors, and same, of course, with Playhouse 90. That was out here. But you had Kraft Theater and U.S. Steel Hour. Alex Siegel did a great many. I worked with him on those. And you just had really, really top people that were very happy to do television at that time on these particular shows. They were, as I said, they were rehearsed, which was pretty, you felt pretty comfortable by the time you did the actual show. But you never got to do anything again, you're right. If something went wrong, you just kept going. And a lot of things did go wrong, which were funny, as it turned out.
Do you have an anecdote that you want to along those lines?
Well, I did do a show, Climax, which was out here. And it was about an actual happening. I think it was called the 78th floor, about a plane that crashed into the Empire State Building. It did happen. And so this was a reenactment of that and all the drama that was going on in the building on the whatever floor. It was 78th floor. And so it was, once the plane hit, it was a lot of smoke and a lot of blood and torn clothes and people dashing around. And all of a sudden we looked up and there was a stagehand walking by the 78th floor out the window. And, he kind of went, oh! And he went running, and it was live. That was it. That's what the audience saw, and it must have been funny. We never saw those shows because they were live, and we never got to see them again. It was fun. Well, Campus Hoopla was set in a soda fountain, and it was about a bunch of young kids, teenagers, and there was dancing and singing and kind of little scenes and skits, as I recall. My sister, Anne, was a musical comedy gal, and she was one of the singers, and Eva Marie Saint was the other one. And so I tagged along with my sister one day. They shot it in Studio 8H at NBC in New York. It was one of the first shows. I think it was directed by Fred Coe, one of the great TV pioneers. And she let me come along one day. I was pretty small. And they needed a kid to do the commercial, a live commercial for kids. And so I got to say, best for mama, best for papa, and best for the KIDS, that's me. Well, that was the end of me. I just loved it. I just said, I like this. I want to do this again. So that was my first time on television.
So that was the moment.
That was it. You know how
What was it about
just
that
get
really
bitten.
did it for you? Well, tell me.
Oh, I just loved it. I mean, I just thought I was so shy. But boy, when I kind of got in front of that camera and I saw everybody around and my sister and all the fun, they were having such a great time. I thought, I really like this. So I think I met with the writers, who the writers were. I mean, they were just the greatest writers in comedy of all time. I didn't know it at the time. It was Woody Allen, Larry Gelbart, Neil Simon, and I was the hostess. They would have a different host or hostess every week. So I was just the hostess for one time. But I got to do a skit with Sid and Carl about the Hippocratic Oath. And the door, I was supposed to come racing in this door, and the door wouldn't open. So I'm pushing and pulling and pushing. Those doors the sets were kind of like cardboard. So the whole thing was now going all different directions. And finally, a stagehand sees this, and he comes over and he pushes, and I go flying in the door. And we played the scene. Yeah, but there again, when you're a kid, when you're young, it didn't bother me, but I think it rattled them on the other side. They were waiting for me to come through. Phil Carlson directed it, a really wonderful, serious director. And he felt that this was really an important piece of material. So he clearly took it seriously, and so did Bob Stack. There was a real feeling of something important going on. And I got to play Bob's wife on the pilot, which became a film, I think, as well. And he also knew this was important for him. Bob did. He knew that he could really, and as it happened, he did, win the Emmy, and it went on to be so successful. But I didn't get to do all that, all of the rough scenes with the guns and the shooting and the stuff. But there was a scene where the character gets raped, if you recall. So that was, and Phil, working with the director on that, was really impressive. He kind of handled that difficult kind of scene so well for me. I ended up doing Key Witness for him after that to a film. Again, another very serious kind of storyline, and he just took things very seriously. And having done so much comedy, you know, I wasn't. This was interesting for me.
It's like it must have been quite a challenge to do that for television.
Yeah, it was. They spent a lot of money on that too. The production was huge, and that was Desilu Productions.
And it was also the first thing that Quinn Martin ever produced.
Yes, I was. Yeah.
And did you encounter him? Was he there, part of that?
Yes, he was. I mean, this was, as I say, a very serious project for the studio. And I got to meet him. I didn't, you know, he didn't come that often. Some producers would, Aaron Spelling was on every set, the first day of every show. He would come down on the set and welcome everybody. And he was one of the few that did that. You didn't see the producers that often. But he loved his shows. Well, James Garner is James Garner, and it just doesn't get any better than that. I mean, he was so delightful on Maverick. And just, you know, the poor guy apparently is a youngster, or a young man. He was a race car driver, and a football player. That's right, he was a football star in college. And he just wrecked his body. But he wanted to do all of the stunts in all these shows. I mean, everything. He wanted to be the stunt. I mean, and Rockford, he did really difficult stuff, I'm told. But here he was just damaged. His body he could barely handle it, but he did it. So he was just a real guy's guy, and so nice to work with. I loved him. Love it. I had been a fan of Bonanza, watching it over the years, and I got this role, and I thought, this is fun. I got to sing and dance and on a bar, you know, with very little rehearsal. We had nothing. We were kind of off stage before that scene, and somebody came along and said, well, maybe we should figure out some steps you can do on the bar. I said, yeah, that's a good idea. So we kind of, you know, fiddled around with that and did it, and I had a great time on that, too. They welcomed me. And of course, I worked mostly with Michael and a little boy. I had a little boy. And no, they just couldn't have been nicer, all of them. I didn't do much with Dan Blocker, but he was in the bar when I was dancing on the thing. He was in the bar room. And I had to not audition, but sing over the telephone to David Rose, who wrote the song, who I guess wrote the music for Bonanza. And the theme song and everything, but he didn't know if I could sing, and he said, would you mind singing, you know, over the phone? And so I did, and I guess it passed, and I got the job. Well, come to think of it, the music was so great, wasn't it? I just loved that music, and the 4 characters. You had such great characters there, all 4. And was that David Dort?
Dort, yes.
Yeah, David Dort. Terrific producer, brought kind of a whole fresh new look to Westerns with that. And I do think the music had a lot to do with it. But those 4 guys, you just couldn't beat those men. I did a film, There's Always Tomorrow, directed by Douglas Sirk. And they did a tribute to her about a year ago at the Academy, which would have been her 100th birthday. And so I was there and on a panel. And I read a few books about her, you know, before that, so that I could kind of learn more about her. And I mean, I was just so thrilled to get to work with her, because she was pretty much one of my film idols. And working with her was exactly what everybody said. She would come on, she would be the first one there and the first one to walk on the set, say hi to all the guys and gals that work there, knew their names, most of them, because she'd done so many films that a lot of them were the same people. She knew them, she knew their families. At the end of the day, she said goodnight to them. Everyone, well, they just loved her. They'd do anything for her. And the actors as well. I mean, she couldn't have been more helpful to me as a young actress at that time. I was really in awe of her, and working in scenes with her was just a thrill. It's a really good lesson. Yes, sir, I do. I do think I tried to do that, particularly in Daisies, because, you know, that was a series that ran, and when we'd have guest stars, like I remember Audrey Meadows came on, and I had a little dressing. In some shows, you have a dressing room, a little like funny little wooden house on the set, which was really nice. And so I told her, you know, to share the dressing room. I was so thrilled that she was doing the show and that I got to work with her. So she did, you know, she changed in my dream. We'd sit around there. It was just a little tiny thing. But, you know, it had a couch and a dressing table and a chair. So, yeah, I was very aware of people coming in to our show as guests, and we all knew each other. We were very comfortable, and they're coming in just for that week. So, yeah, and I definitely learned that from Barbara Stanwyck. Well, I think by the time I did it, it was already very well received, and Rod Serling was like, you know, this genius. But that particular show was with Burgess Meredith playing the devil, the printer's devil. And this man, oh boy, is he was working that printing machine like an organ in St. Patrick's Cathedral. I mean, he was just, and he came up with the idea of the crooked cigar that he always had in this. And he left the set getting back to whether yes, I knew that the series was, but I thought this particular show was really well written, and having Burgess Meredith play the devil so well. But every day after the show, rather after we finished shooting at 8 o'clock, 7:30, he would go over to Charles Laughton's house and sit there because Elsa Lanchester, his wife, was very, very ill. So he would go over there at night and spend the evening there, come back in the morning at 6 o'clock, know his lines perfectly. And I thought that was pretty amazing, that he was so concerned for Charles Laughton, his good friend, that he sat with him every night of that show, and probably before and after that. And I think she died soon after, passed away. Well, I got killed off right away in that one. I think I had three scenes, but luckily one was with Peter Falk, and the other was with Ray Milland. Ray Milland. He was my husband, and we shot at that on location at that fantastic house in Beverly Hills that was Marion Davies' house, and it's got all those kind of pools that go on down. Oh, in fact, I can't think of the name. Bodyguard was shot there as well. That's right. But so I got to work with Ray Milland and also Bob Culp, who I get killed. He throws me into a glass coffee table, which shatters, and so that was short-lived. But I loved working with those guys. I just love to work, actually. That's the problem. We came to know him. I know his wife, Shara, very well. We're in a charity group, Share, together. And we've come to know them. And my husband, Andy Friendly, plays golf with Peter, or did, at Riviera here. And he'd only met him 2 or 3 times and found out that it was going to be his 75th birthday. So he said, "Oh, well, we're going to give you a birthday party." He came home and said, "We're giving Peter Falk his 75th birthday party." I said, "Oh, that's great." Really? And we did. We had all the golf buddies and Shara and me. I think we were the only 2. It was so much fun. He was so happy. He got a big kick out of it. And the guys got together and gave him they cleaned out his locker, which had stuff in it from about 40 years ago, sweaters balled up, and they put it in a gift box and wrapped it up and gave it to him as his birthday present. He is more fun than, yeah, he's having a rough time now. Well, you know, they kind of told you what happened, and then the rest of the show, you were in on the whole thing. And Peter was so charming, and you saw him just taking all these bad guys right down. You loved it. And when he walked into the doors, I mean, as he would leave, he'd walk into a closet or whatever. We have a situation like that in our house, and people walk right into this closet thinking it's the front door, and no, this isn't Columbo. They do. They sent the script. It was a David Gerber production. He had done Police Story, then he did Police Woman, and actually did Joe Forrester, which I did with regularly on that with Lloyd Bridges. But the script came over, and it was the role of a lesbian woman that had apparently maybe at one point roomed with Angie. And so they were now, I can't recall who, it might have been internal, that she was as well. And so it went to an actual trial. And it turns out that we were not, and I testified that we were never girlfriend and girlfriend, but that was the storyline, that particular one. So I kind of, at the time, you're right, the kids were little, and I remember saying, you know, to my husband, I said, what do you think of this? And they said, great. They knew and loved David Gerber and knew that he only did really, really very wonderful things. And as I say, I went on to do Joe Forrester, the series, with Lloyd. Well, I really love to work, and unless it's something that's not, you know, that's really, and I don't mean to say that I grab everything, but I did think there was value in that. And, you know, maybe up to then, a lesbian might have been portrayed as tough and this and that, and maybe a certain look. And they didn't want, you know, they wanted a feminine woman, which of course is the case, you know, with that situation. And I think that was what they were looking for, kind of a contrast to what would have been cast in that time period. Not anymore, that's not the case, obviously. First of all, I love the book. Then I love the movie. I had two children, the ages sort of the twins, and this was a woman who was a career woman. She was a writer, the character that I played. They had a good marriage. It was kind of different in that the father was a professor. He was very, and in some cases, the fathers in some of these sitcoms were kind of on the dumb side. And not in this one, though. They couldn't make him dumb. He was smart and terrific. But she was a woman she wore, for the, you know, tight pants, the capris all over the place. She didn't keep a spiffy house. It was pretty messy. And she had the 4 kids that she dealt with, and the big dog, and the falling down house, which was, you know, constantly being fixed. We had, as in Murphy Brown, remember the painter that practically lived there? Well, we had Mr. Hewley, who was our handyman, and he was always in the shows. He was so cute, because something was going wrong somewhere in this funny old Victorian house. And so for a role, it was a great role for me, because she was very, you know, independent, very feisty, very, you know, having fun, raising her kids, which I sort of did. I loved having fun with the kids that, you know, when they were that age. And so I think we brought that to the show. I did. I liked the fact that she worked. I liked the fact that her career was, you know, important. She was kind of juggling it all. And I liked the fact that up to then, the women were wonderful, but they, you know, all wear the skirts, and they all kind of were just didn't seem to have a lot of dimension. We always had a message in the show, but I did like the idea that she was able to juggle everything, because that's what I was trying to do too. And we also slept in a big bed together. Yes, no twin beds for us. We were the first ones who did that. We had those 4 kids too. No, and because we stood, the producers, and they stood firm, and they thought it was time to be realistic here. And that's how that came about. They didn't object. NBC, Well, it was a little campy, but the role I played was very depressing. I mean, she was a sad creature. She was having lots of problems, and so there was no camp. In my particular storyline, she was just this kind of pathetic creature, and so I didn't really see the camp part of it. Although we did this big costume ball, and that was pretty over the top now that I think about it. But I didn't really get to work with Joan Collins, and she's the one that brought so much fun to that, and they let her go for it. But so it was pretty serious, the storyline that I had. I don't call them soaps. I call them daytime dramas. And that was a nighttime drama to me. But I guess because it was a continuing story. Boy, they're hard, the daytime ones. I'm telling you. It was like live TV, but with absolutely no rehearsal. You really don't. You get to know where to move and what to sit on this, or maybe walk out there and in a door here. And that's it. And it's the same as live. They don't like to do a second take. And reams of dialogue because there's no action. It's just talking heads. So doing that later in life as an actor is tough because it's by now, it's very difficult to learn all those lines. There are no cue cards. There are nothing. There's nothing to help you. So you're flying out there without a net. Isn't it amazing? I mean, I give these people credit that have done it for years and years, and they're good. I mean, because not every scene is going to be good every time, because it is. It's so fast. But once in a while, wow, it can be wonderful. It can be. But Dynasty, yeah, you had 9 days, I think, to shoot an hour. They spent a lot of time on that. A lot of money and a lot of time. Good directors, good writing. I think the cast, the writing. People love to see rich people like that, just rolling in the money and just bring them down a notch or two. I think it had everything. And you had Aaron Spelling producing it. You don't get any better than that. It was, yes. We were told that was the first time that actually had been done, and I was thrilled to be a part of that. And again, a really, really fine cast. And we had a terrific producer, Rudy, who actually left the show at one time, but there was a very definite feeling that we were breaking through this. This was new. This was the first time that this was happening. Was equal, the white family and the African American extended families, all knowing and getting together all the time, and friends. As an actor, you want interesting roles, but I don't do the writing. Don't I wish I could? I really respect the writing and the writers. They're the ones that are coming up with these, with these characters and these concepts, and then we as actors get lucky enough to bring it forward and tell the story that they've written and portray the characters they've created. So on that one, I was just happy to get such a nice role and to be a part of this breakthrough. I thought it was a great breakthrough. It's like it's a marriage of so many things, but you start with the script. That's the beginning, and of course that was the perfect marriage. Falk and Columbo. It's true. He was Columbo. He brought himself to that role, no question. Just like James Gardner, Rockford. I mean, you can't imagine anybody else playing that. Now, I played Maverick. I did 3 Mavericks with different. He had left by then, and I think who was the one that was James Bond? he played Roger Moore, and then I think there was a third. So in that case, they were able to kind of replace him, but I don't think you'd ever replace Jim Garner on Rockford or Peter on Columbo. They did bring themselves to those characters. It's hard to go on to a series where they've all, it's very comfortable. You're kind of coming in here for the first time, not knowing. I just did, not just now, it's been a year, a Cold Case. And difficult part to get. It was hard, casting today is tough. Everybody's out there and there aren't many roles. So having gotten the role, which I auditioned for and so forth, I walked on that set at like 5 in the morning because it was clear way out somewhere east of LA in the dark, and I walked into that trailer, the makeup and hair trailer, and I never felt so welcome in my life. They were so nice, so great to me. And then we went on the set when the dawn was breaking, and we were outside. And again, everybody on that, maybe they talk to them in the morning and say, now look, when somebody new comes in here, you be nice, you extend yourself. And that's what they did. They really did, everybody on that set, and they were the top of the line. It was like the top movie set. It's Jerry Bruckheimer, and wow, they really go out of their way to make the actors comfortable, happy, whatever it takes. They provided it. It was just a really good experience. Well, it depends, because you do the 3-camera live with the audience comedy shows. You do the film. Our show series, Daisies, was 1 camera, and we shot for 4 days. And a film shot in the 60s or the 70s or the 50s, it's not all that much different. You've got the crew, you've got your best boy, you've got all your your cinematographer, your lighting people, your costumers, it's kind of the same formula. And I don't see, that's why when I said Cold Case, it felt like $1 million film. Well, they are $1 million now, but I mean, really such a professional, classy show, everything they do on it. And the actors on that show, again, very welcoming and very open and friendly. And so it depended on what kind of film it was. The first film I did was not a happy company, and I thought they were all going to be like that. Well, that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. My second one was a Martin and Lewis film, which was completely the opposite. Nothing but fun and silly and great with those two. So, I mean, it depends on the vehicle. It depends on the show. I did 2 films with Dean and Jerry, and the first one they were just fine. That was early on, and then I did one a couple of years later, and that one I had been told they were going to go their separate ways. Well, not on the set. They were so professional. Still lots of fun, and I'm sure, in the background it wasn't, but with me, and we had a lot to do together in that show, in Hollywood or Bust, and I never saw any kind of rancor between the two of them. I think at that point they were ready to, go and do their own things, and they both did really well. That's amazing after a split up like that. They were so huge as a team, but they both were incredibly successful after. I never wanted to be, I never thought about it, but when I see these kids today that are like these celebrities, it just makes me sad because I never had to deal with anything like that. I was way under the radar. I raised my kids, my family, and so I kind of had the best of it. And I just love the work. I just love getting a call. You're going to work. Here's the script, and the process of learning the lines and creating a character and meeting the other actors and the director, and I guess just the love of working for me was what it was about. So as I said, I pretty much took what came along, and unless it was totally awful, but I did, and I came to learn that in some cases, in some, like spelling, if you turned him down, and I did a lot of stuff for them, you might not get a call again. And David Gerber, same thing. He had several shows, and again, there are a lot of other people out there that are very happy to take those roles. So you better think about that. And of course, as I say, if any young people, I love doing summers. I did summer stock to start with, which was the greatest training ground, still is. But I think that daytime television training ground for young people, young actors, whoa, if you can do that and do well, you can pretty much handle anything as an actor. Oh, and I never made any money. You knew what I got on Daisies. It's pathetic. But again, that wasn't, I didn't think about that. I mean, they weren't paying what they're paying these days either. But I just never cared. See, I'm wearing my little inexpensive little J. Crew Michelle Obama. My favorite store is the Gap, so that kind of gives you an idea. Well, after Daisies, I would get recognized, but people were so polite that they would kind of wait till I was sort of, not with my family or not with a friend or something, and kind of come over and quietly say, "We really like your work." And it was like they were so polite that I thought, well, maybe you might say it in front of my family so they know that, that their mother's not a non-entity. And the kids just got the biggest kick out of it. They really would when people, and I was with two of my granddaughters, and somebody stopped, and I mean, it's rare now that anybody bothers to stop and say anything, but the kids just thought that was great. Why did that person stop? Do they know you? Do you know them? Why would they do that? So I love that. So I don't mind it. No, and I never would want to be a celebrity in this day and age. It's pretty scary when you see some of these young people that are just, whoa, I mean, it happens like that. And it's hard to, where do you go to learn how to handle that? It's tough. Did I get too big for my shoes? Yeah, I kind of did that a little bit after Daisies. I kind of think that I thought more things were coming. I should be getting more things. But it's true, and with so many people on series that they're kind of identified with, it's a little hard when you come off that to get. And I do remember I was working at Disney and doing a film for the 2-hour films that they did. And I kind of got a little, I thought, this isn't the way it was, and on Daisies, and do they know that I was on Daisies here? But I got over that real fast, because you just can't do that. You can't behave that way. So I think that was the one time that I really caught myself. You just can't. We did 39 shows at that time. Like Friends, I think the last couple of years, how many were they doing? Maybe 13. So we were almost, when you put it together, we did 2.5, I think, years. And we were on opposite Gleason when he came back in color, and that was huge. That was our competition. We followed My Mother the Car, which was our lead-in, and who knows, I thought the writing was very intelligent and very sweet, and we had Burgess Meredith on one show, which was lovely. That was nominated, and who knows, we had one sponsor, at that time, one sponsor would be, and we had Procter & Gamble. You don't get any better than that. And they loved the show. They loved it. I went to one of their conventions, and oh my gosh, we just love this. And the next thing I found out, a few months later, they didn't pick it up. But that's the business. Well, we were on a plane to Hawaii, and about an hour out, the stewardess said that there was a fellow we were kind of in the front, there was a fellow in the back of the plane that was acting strangely. And so my husband, we were seated across the aisle from a doctor who was going to Hawaii with his 2 sons for the first time. And so the 2 of them started talking, well, to the steward, why can't we help you subdue him and do something? Well, for the next 3.5, they're not allowed to do that. So for the next 3.5 hours, this guy started to wander around the plane. He sat across in the bunker seat, what is that seat, that's right behind the first section. And there was a baby, and he threatened to kill the baby. But they still, until he lunged for the baby, they couldn't do anything, which seemed so crazy. But those were the rules. So now we're just about to Hawaii. Well, it was a heck of a trip, the 5 hours. Everybody on board and my husband and the fellow, the doctor across the aisle, had made a plan that if he ran for the cockpit, they would come together and get him. Well, he runs for the cockpit. The stewardess is behind him, pulls his sweater, pulls him back, and the 2 guys, wrestled him to the ground, pulled him back to that bunker seat, on the floor, and they put the cuffs, those plastic white cuffs, and a couple of other guys at that point jumped up and sort of held. He bit one of them very badly because that was all he had to. He was kicking and flailing and biting. And finally, we landed, and he was going to the cockpit. Now, it was locked. I'm sure it was locked. But still in all, who knew what he had on him? Nobody knew. Nobody could touch him. And so the FBI came on. They had all been alerted for 4 hours. They had been waiting in Honolulu, and they came on the plane and took him out. And we were held there at the airport for several hours and questioned, and I can't believe you saw that. Yeah, I was very proud of
Was that post 9/11?
Andy. It was after.
Which makes it all the more scary.
Well, exactly. I mean, everybody was saying if something happens, then everybody, unless there's a man, there was no, what's the name of the person that's supposed to be on the plane protecting us all? The marshal. There wasn't any marshal. So it was, and the poor stewardess couldn't do anything. There were several students, none of them. This one feisty one, she was the one that grabbed him enough to stop him in front of our aisle, and they got him down. That would be on the internet.
Your husband's a hero.
He was a hero. He really was, and so was the doctor. He was going to get to Hawaii with his 2 kids, that was for sure. That was for sure. I did the very last one. And come to think of it, I did the very last Charlie's Angels. I sort of put those shows away.
Well, tell me about the last Hawaii Five-0 first.
Oh. Well, he was an interesting actor, Jack Lord. He was very, there were a lot of stories about him. I got along fine. But he was, let me think now, he took it very seriously. Now, this was the last show. How many years had that been on? Boy, you'd think it was the first show. You would have thought it was the pilot. He was so into it. He wore a beard. He played 2 characters. Or no, he played himself, playing another character. And Woe to Woe Fat, I think was the name of the show. And he was just an interesting actor, and his persona was kind of, I knew about him, and I knew some of these interesting stories about him. Well, it was Thanksgiving, and I'd never up to then been away from my family at Thanksgiving. At that point, my children had, and he invited me to Thanksgiving dinner, and I thought, how nice, and really how kind that is. We had mutual friends back here, which we talked about once, so I thought that is so nice. But about 5:30 Thanksgiving, I get a call. And he said, we're not going to go to Thanksgiving dinner tonight. We decided to stay home, he and his wife. And I said, oh, okay, no problem, no problem. And with that, the director of the show, who I'd worked with before too, a terrific guy whose name escapes me right now, he happened to call. And he knew I was going to be going to dinner with him because that was it. He had asked me if I wanted to go because he was in Hawaii too. By himself and stuff. So sure enough, he called to see, if I was going to be going. I said, no, they're not going to do it tonight. Well, he said, then we're going to have Thanksgiving dinner together, which we did, which was great. But that sort of, and I don't think he meant any harm. I don't think he really knew that Thanksgiving was kind of a big thing for me and that I was away from my family or anything. But it was. Well, a bit of both. He definitely has a hand in those shows. You had real flowers on the set. You had really good food on the set if you had dinner scenes or if there were party scenes. Everything was very, very top of the line. And I got to know the girls in the costume department, and they're just, hey, Pat, welcome back. We saw you were going to be on the show. You almost felt like you were in a series because I would go from one to the other. I did a pilot for him called Friends. And I don't know how, I guess they didn't have the name. They didn't own the name, but sure enough, along came Friends later. This one had nothing to do with the later version. But yeah, I did a couple of pilots for him. But he did have definitely, and as I say, he would come on the opening day. He would come on the set and say hi to everybody and welcome. Not everybody did that. I did the Frank Sinatra show. Did you remember that he had a detective show? Didn't last very long, I guess. Yes, we shot it at Golden. I played his wife, just one show. And I think I had met him at big parties and stuff. Well, there just was nothing quite like Frank Sinatra. Those eyes, boy, when they looked at you and they focused, it was just about the best thing that could happen. So here I was playing his wife, and in the close-ups in the scene, he did have cue cards right here. But he did it so well that he really just kind of, I'm sure like they do on Saturday Night Live, you catch them kind of glancing at the cue cards, but in this case, he barely needed them. I think it was just there. But that's the only time that I can remember, cue cards in a film show or in a show like that. But just working with him it was just, he was like, I'm the biggest fan of all time of Frank Sinatra. So I got to be his wife in one episode. I felt pretty comfortable with him. Yeah, you're all in this together. You're all in it together. I was intimidated by Elvis Presley. I didn't work with him, but he was a friend and a client of my husband who represented him in Los Angeles, and so I was pretty intimidated by him. And I used to carry a camera with me all the time. When I'd go to friends' parties, I'd kind of take pictures and send them to them in a week or so. I never took a picture of Elvis, and he was at the house for dinner. I never took a picture of Sinatra when I did that show. I don't have any pictures like that. It makes me sad because I felt, pardon?
With Photoshop.
Yeah, I just felt that it wasn't the right thing to do, that he was so you know, I mean, he lived this secluded life. He couldn't really, go out among the rest of the people. And I thought, I'm not going to do that. And I'm so sorry I didn't. But I did kind of know him. And we did have him in the house. And he loved it. I mean, he liked the dinner, that is. He liked the dinner. Thank God. Simple. Simple dinner. Well, I think he had done one movie or something. And he worked with, it was interesting, he worked with a gal who apparently was well known in town. I didn't really know it at the time. Elsa Schreiber, she was a coach. She was, I believe, Romanian, had a cute accent. She's a roly-poly lady. Turns out she worked with some of the top film stars. And I worked with her because she directed her, I think the only time she ever actually directed, she directed a pilot I did for Sidney Sheldon called My Man Sing. And she directed it, so I worked with her. And she had just worked with Paul Newman. And because when I went to do the show, the Philco Playhouse, I saw the notes on his script. Every page were these voluminous notes going down every page about ideas and, but they were from her. That was her technique. So I thought, wow, she really is good. He's going to her. See, he was an actor studio guy. Well, I never got to do one thing that long that I got tired of it. I've never been in a major hit. I've just been a working girl actor, and I never got bored with anything because we weren't such a hit. And and then doing the guest star or the guest things were really fun for me. I did like meeting new people and working with new actors. Like Friends, I did a Friends, and watching them put that show together was pretty amazing. With the writers again, and changing and improving, and picking out little things that they could do better or eliminate, and I just that was just amazing to watch them build a scene and make it sail. They were all incredibly talented and all worked to make it better all the time. That was a 3-camera show, so they rehearsed for a week, and they were just honing it all the time. That's why it was so good. And as I said, with my family, I was able to raise a family and knock wood. They turned out to be really nice. They did. I can't believe it. So lucky.
That is a challenge. I mean,
it is in the business, and they're both in the business. Well, my son definitely is. He's at Fox, and our daughter is married to it, an executive at Sony. So they're still in the business. I mean, they're in the business, which in a way you kind of don't necessarily encourage your kids to go in the business, knowing from an actor's point of view, it can be, discouraging. You're selling yourself out there as a piece of meat. And if they don't buy you, it's tough. You want to do those roles, and if you don't get them, it's hard. I would love to have done the Dick Van Dyke Show. I did meet with Carl Reiner at his house. I was with William Morris, the agency, and they sent me over there. I think my agent was there, Norman Brokaw, and I met with them for that. And wow, what a great show. And how fabulous was she. But, that was something I would love to have done.
You would have been great in that.
Yes!
Man, I can just see you. I'm replaying in my mind.
We had the hair. Oh, I love that show. The writer was Roy Huggins. And he just was, brilliant. I mean, he just wrote these incredible scripts that were, and he loved working. I'm sure. I'm sure that he just loved writing for James Garner and Jack Kelly, and they brought in a lot of really good actresses to play off these guys, and it was the writing. There it is again, and the twinkle, that Garner had, and the two together, Kelly and Garner. And then later, Roger Moore. It worked. It just worked. But it was. I remember we did one, I think, called The Rivals, from an old play, and they kind of made it work in that genre. And it really was adorable. But they were looking for, different kind of things to bring in to this Western. It was just a Western, but they made it much more than that. And there was like a company of actors at Warner's at that time, because they had about 7 or 8 shows. They were the Aaron Spelling at that point, and you'd go from one show to the other, and it was fun, because I did a Bronco directed by Bob Altman, and then you go to another one, and I mean. And the parts written for the women were really fun. I played a card shark. I played a murderess on one of them. But they had about 8 shows, and you just went from one to the other. You get a script when you finish one show, and you'd be starting another one the next week. It was fun. No, it does in the dramatic ones, definitely. The Key Witness, I remember coming home, and I couldn't shake the scene that we had shot that day, and also the Untouchables, same thing. It took a few days. You bring home the emotion, and it's also a case of, gee, I could have done it better. Wish I could do it again. There's a lot of that you bring with you. But then in the comedy stuff, it's kind of fun. You can't wait to get there the next day and play.
You touched on the Untouchables. It was hard to take on because of the intensity?
Yes. Well, in that one scene, there was the rape scene. And Phil Carlson, as I say, he works in such a way that you really are pulling out everything you can for the scene, for the character, for him, as the director. Well, I use a little bit of everything. I'm a great lesson taker. I love to take classes in anything, actually. But yeah, I've been in several groups in town here, and I worked with Uta Hagen in a play in New York, and I idolized her and her technique, and I know just a little bit of everything, and finally, just telling the story. I think that's really what it is.
Learn your lines first, tell a story.
Learn the lines and listen to the other guy, as Spencer Tracy. That was his advice. I never met him. I would love to have, but I've read that so many times that was his advice. Always just listen. Don't get so wrapped up in just listen to the other actor. Listen to the words.
And how does that make the performance better?
Because you're reacting, you're in the scene, you're in the moment, you're listening, you're working in that particular scene right then and there. You're not thinking of what the next thing is going to be. You're, what is he saying? What I want to hear what he has to say. And with kids, it works too. If you really get eyeball to eyeball with them, they kind of get, I think, more natural and more interested. They think someone, it's not just by rote. They kind of like that you really listen to what they say. And then they listen to what you say, hopefully.